More to the point though, in 2021, Dr. Nick Walker, PhD, released his book, Neuroqueer Heresies, Notes on the Neurodiversity Paradigm, Autistic Empowerment, and Post-Normal Possibilities, an extrapolation of essays he previously published on his website Neuroqueer, formerly known as Neurocosmopolitanism, one of which was featured in a 2012 anthology of works written for and by autistic people titled Loud Hands, Autistic People Speaking, which is, in my experience, a lot of people's introduction to neurodiversity. An assessment I don't think Walker would disagree with, given that he states, "Throw away the master's tools remains one of the most significant things I've written in terms of its long-term influence on the discourse. It's been widely cited. It's been widely cited in academic works and translated into Spanish, French, Portuguese, Russian, and Czech. The conceptions of the pathology paradigm and the neurodiversity paradigm originally articulated in this piece are now integral to the fields of neurodiversity studies and critical autism studies, fields which didn't exist yet when I wrote those things. So much can happen in the blink of a decade." In this essay, he says, "Neurodiversity is a natural variation in human neurocognitive function. It is not a perspective of belief or political movement. The neurodiversity paradigm, however, is a perspective that views neurodiversity as a valuable form of human diversity. It is not synonymous with the neurodiversity, and the neurodiversity movement is a social justice movement advocating for civil rights and inclusion for neurodivergent individuals. It is not a singular organization, nor does it have a leader." What Walker gets correct in this is that the neurodiversity movement is not a singular organization. It is a movement that, even though it was born out of the autistic self-advocacy movement during its infancy, encompasses people diagnosed with ADHD, bipolar, Tourette syndrome, dyslexia, dyscalculia, and other learning and development disabilities, aka neurominorities, which affect both autistic and allistic non-autistic people. What he gets wrong is everything else. As stated before, neurodiversity is a distinctly political term, even considering it states a biological fact, just like as Singer states on her blog, Biodiversity. It is a political term that names a biological fact. The term neurodiversity was created for the purposes of naming a new paradigm intended to be, in addition to intersectionality, at the heart of a new civil rights movement, aka the neurodiversity movement. Drawing an arbitrary delineation between neurodiversity, the neurodiversity paradigm, and the movement itself doesn't make much sense, especially when you argue that the concept that names the paradigm at the heart of a political movement is not political, even though the paradigm it names and the movement built on it are both political. All three are fundamentally intertwined. Neurodiversity is the paradigm, is the movement. There's quite literally no way of getting around that. And the misconception that you can make any distinctions between neurodiversity, the paradigm it names, and the movement based on it that separates neurodiversity from its politics is, in my opinion, key in how we get to the mainstream understanding of neurodiversity, otherwise known as neurodiversity light, as Sean M. Newmeyer states in their article "To Siri with Love and the Problem with Neurodiversity Light" on rewirednewsgroup.com, which also put a pin in this for later. It's also an interesting delineation to make because Walker goes on to say that neurodiversity itself is, of course, the most essential piece of this new vocabulary of neurodiversity. The essence of the entire paradigm, the understanding of neurological variation as a natural form of human diversity, subject to the same societal dynamics as other forms of diversity, is packed into that one word. How can the essence of the entire paradigm, of a political paradigm, not be political? It's like saying the word feminism isn't a political term, but feminist critique and the feminist movement are political. It simply doesn't make sense. Even the distinction he goes on to make, neurodiversity is the phenomenon of human neurological diversity, and the neurodiversity paradigm is the understanding of neurodiversity as a natural form of human diversity, subject to the same societal dynamics as other forms of diversity, doesn't actually justify saying that neurodiversity isn't political, but the neurodiversity paradigm is, because, again, Neurodiversity is a paradigm. Neurodiversity is a fact. Neurodiversity is fundamentally political. That's the only way that the neurodiversity paradigm can be political. Neurodiversity is not, cannot, and should not ever be understood to be apolitical or politically neutral. In Dr. Devin Price, PhD's 2022 book, Unmasking Autism, Discovering the New Faces of Neurodiversity, he does something interesting and different, yet equally misguided in how he approaches talking about neurodiversity. He doesn't explicitly define it at all. He talks about how exactly he was introduced to the term. Quote, people like Rabbi Ruchi Reagan, author of the blog Real Social Skills, and Amethyst Shaber, the creator of the Neuro Wonderful video series, taught me about neurodiversity. I came to recognize that many disabilities are created or worsened by social exclusion, and explicitly credits Judy Singer with coining the term. Quote, autism is just one source of neurodiversity in our world. The term neurodiverse refers to the wide spectrum of individuals whose thoughts, emotions, or behaviors have been stigmatized as unhealthy, abnormal, or dangerous. The term was coined in 1999 by sociologist Judy Singer. However, he never explicitly defines what it is and what it is not, and he misuses terminology, calling people neurodiverse. Quote, this book is for any person who is neurodiverse or suspects that they are neurodiverse and wants to attain new levels of self-acceptance. Neurodiversity is a wide umbrella, including everyone from autistics to ADHDers to people with schizophrenia, brain injuries, or narcissistic personality disorder, and suggesting that neurodiversity can exist in a single individual. Quote, Rory is an ADHD and autism self-advocate and researcher living in New Zealand. Like so many of us, they've developed autism-friendly quote-unquote life hacks to make regular life manageable. These are compensation strategies in a sense, but their goal isn't to mask Rory's neurodiversity so much as to make life easier and more bearable in a way that I think also helps misguide people about what neurodiversity is and what the aims of the movement are, and lays with almost perfect precision the groundwork for the elite capture of neurodiversity in the form of Neurodiversity Light. To recap, because I know that was probably a lot of information. 1. Dr. Nick Walker, PhD's bifurcation of the term neurodiversity from its fundamental politics is demonstrably wrong. 2. Dr. Devin Price, PhD's avoiding grounding his intended audience with the concrete definition of neurodiversity is unhelpful to the movement. And 3. Both ideas combined contribute to why the efficacy of the neurodiversity movement is incredibly low and why people's understanding of neurodiversity is still rooted within the pathology paradigm. An attempt at pruning other variants or other critiques of the mainstream understanding of neurodiversity. To reiterate though, 1. Neurodiversity is a political term. 2. Neurodiversity is a political term that names a biological truism in the same vein of biodiversity. 3. Neurodiversity is a political term that names a biological truism that names a paradigm. 4. Neurodiversity is a political term that names a biological truism that names a paradigm at the heart of a movement. And 5. Neurodiversity is a political term that names a biological truism that names a paradigm at the heart of a movement that is intended to abolish the ways neurominorities are pathologized by society for not being quote-unquote normal, and challenge the concept of normal to reveal that no such thing actually exists, because, as we all know, what's normal for one person or group is not necessarily normal for another person or group. Now, to be sure, I don't think Price, Walker, or a lot of people whose understanding of neurodiversity was shaped by the work they've done intentionally set out to warp the public perception of neurodiversity to nefarious ends. It's evident that they both, and so many others, are genuinely and earnestly invested in the good of neurodiversity, autistic self-advocacy, and the neurodiversity movement. Both of their books have great ideas that I'll come back to and reference in subsequent videos, and I'm not arguing that we have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I just think that somewhere along the way, something about neurodiversity got lost in translation, a lot of which I think has to do with the fact that Judy Singer is an unabashed transphobe, and people want to distance themselves, neurodiversity, and the neurodiversity movement from her as much as they possibly can without abandoning her to the dustbin of history. And it hasn't helped the movement at all beyond introducing people to a concept whose core principles they feel no real allegiance to. Neurodiversity both means something very specific and absolutely nothing to a lot of people, as evidenced by the general state of neurodiversity discourse, which is still very much rooted and invested in the pathologizing of minorities in hopes that diversity, equity, and inclusion alone will solve the issues fundamental to psychology and psychiatry. Put a pin in this for later. I'm going to dedicate an entire video to this very topic.